Mr. Forgetful by Roger Hargreaves. It was one of those beautiful summer mornings that everybody likes to see. In Forget-Me-Not Cottage, the owner was fast asleep. Mr. Forgetful, he was having a dream. Then the sun streaming through the windows woke up Mr. Forgetful. Oh, he yawned and scratched his arms and tried to remember what he had been dreaming about. But of course he couldn't, because Mr. Forgetful can't remember anything at all, ever. Mr. Forgetful got out of bed and went to wash his face, but he'd forgotten where the bathroom was in his house. Do you know what he did? He walked into the wardrobe. Silly me, he giggled to himself. Eventually, of course, Mr. Forgetful found his bathroom and washed his face. He even remembered to clean his teeth. Then he went downstairs to make himself some breakfast. He toasted some bread, but of course he forgot about it and it was burnt. He boiled himself an egg, but he forgot about it and it was hard-boiled. Mr. Forgetful has burnt toast and hard-boiled eggs for breakfast every day. It was such a lovely day, Mr. Forgetful decided to walk down the village to buy a stamp for a letter he'd written 3 weeks ago, but had forgotten to the post. Off he set. He remembered to shut the door from Forget-Me-Not Cottage behind him. Of course he didn't. Good morning, Mr. Forgetful, says Mr. Purcell in the village post office. What can I do for you this fine morning? I forgot it, he said. A stamp, said Miss Purcell, looking at the letter Miss Forgetful was carrying. Yes, a stamp. It was. I was trying to remember not to forget, said Miss Forgetful. Miss Purcell smiled. She was used to Miss Forgetful. Mr. Forgetful had more shopping to do, but could he remember what it was he supposed to remember not to forget to shop for? Of course he couldn't. So he decided to go home. On his way, he met a village policeman going the other way. Morning, Mr. Forgetful, said the policeman. Will you give Farmer Fields a message from me on your way home, please? Farmer Fields had a farm not very far from Forget-Me-Not Cottage. Tell me there's a sheep loose in the lane, said the policeman. Poor Mr. Forgetful, he'd never had a message to remember in his life before. There's a sheep loose in the lane, he said to himself, trying to remember the message as he hurried along. There's a sheep loose in the lane. 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 Mr. Forgetful repeated the message over and over to himself. There's a sheep loose in the lane. There's a sheep loose in the lane. Eventually, he arrived at the farm and found Farmer Fields. Mr. Fields, he said, there's a goose asleep in the rain. Farmer Fields couldn't believe his ears. There's a goose asleep in the rain, repeated Farmer Fields slowly. But I don't have any geese. And anyway, it isn't raining. Are you sure that was the message? Poor Mr. Forgetful, he got it all wrong. And he couldn't remember how to get it all right. He simply couldn't remember at all. So off he went. Poor Mr. Forgetful. Mr. Forgetful walked away from Farmer Fields' farm, feeling very sorry for himself. I wish I could remember things, he thought. He was so busy feeling sorry for himself that he didn't see that there was a sheep loose in the lane. He bumped into it and fell over. Bother, said Mr. Forgetful. Bah, said the sheep. How silly letting the sheep loose in the lane, thought Mr. Forgetful. And then he remembered the message. He jumped up and ran along the lane to the farm as fast as she could. Miss Fizz, he called as he ran into the farmyard. Miss Fizz, there's a goose asleep in the rain. He's forgotten again. Miss Fizz scratched his head. Come with me, come on, cried Miss Forgetful, and put Farmer Fields back along the lane until they came to the sheep that was loose. There it is, cried Miss Forgetful, putting a goose. There, then he stopped. Oh dear, that's not the goose, is it? That's the sheep. And he blushed. I think, smudged Farmer Fields, that you're going the goose. And he chuckled, and Miss Forgetful giggled, and Farmer Fields laughed. And even the sheep started to laugh. It was so funny. Later that day, Miss Forgetful sat down in his favorite armchair in Forget-Me-Not Cottage to think about what a funny day it had been. But do you know something? He tried and tried, but try as he would, he simply couldn't remember anything that had happened. Oh, Mr. Forgetful.